Hey everybody, today I was in a very synth pop kind of mood, and so I thought, why not make a video and show 10 essential synth pop albums. I'm not saying these are the 10 best synth pop albums, but if you are a fan of the genre, these are albums that you should own as part of your collection, and maybe you already do, but I'm just going to give a list of 10 that I probably play most frequently, that are favorites of mine. So the first one I want to show, this is Naked Eyes. Yeah, Naked Eyes. Come for always something there to remind me and promises, but stay for the excellent synth pop in songs like When the Lights Go Out, which I believe was a single. This particular album, I think it was one of those US hybrids. This was not an official UK release. Their first album was called Burning Bridges, if I'm not mistaken, and I think they took some songs from that, maybe songs from their second album, and this was their first US long player. But some great synth pop here, and I think most people, they only think of Naked Eyes for those two radio hits. One was the cover, Always Something There to Remind Me, and then, of course, Promises. But there's some other great synth pop tracks on here as well. If you haven't checked this album out, I'm going to give you a little teaser here for my favorite track on the album.
Everything is all too much. She just lays in bed at night. The day's alright with them. When the lights go out, she calls your name. When the lights go out, always the same. Always someone left out in the rain. It's always the same. She's the kind who needs the tender touch. She never wants to compromise. What you thought you'd never have gets up, disappears before your eyes. The days alright with them. When the lights go out, she calls your name. When the lights go out, always the same. Always someone left out in the rain. It's always the same. It's always the same.
But if you see this one, check it out. It is a great record, and especially if you're into that early analog synth pop from the early 80s, 81, 82, 83, that's the sweet spot right there for a lot of what I consider to be the best music of this particular genre. But pick that one up for sure. Next band I want to show, this is Japan, and this is their third full-length album, Quiet Life. This was a band, they were from England, they started in the early 1970s, and they adopted the whole David Bowie androgynous look, and this band inspired Duran Duran. If you don't believe me, listen to this. It almost sounds like on the first two Duran Duran albums, they're kind of like a knockoff of Japan. You can definitely see the influence. As a matter of fact, this guy right here, he looks like Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran. So not only did they adopt the style of music that Japan was making, but also their look as well. This is a great one. My favorite track on here is Halloween. It's early synth pop. We're talking like 1974 is when this band started out. I think this album might be, I'm not sure what year this came out. I know it's definitely late 70s, but it's at least a couple years before Duran Duran put out their first album. And And the hilarious thing is, which I learned, these guys opened for Blue Oyster Cult on tour. I am not kidding. Japan opening for Blue Oyster Cult blows my mind and makes me laugh. I can't even imagine. And of course, they were not a big hit. I think they got booed. Anyway, check out Japan. And you know, I'm always going to talk about orchestral maneuvers in the dark when we are talking about great synth pop bands, early synth pop pioneers. Of course, they were heavily influenced by Kraftwerk. This is their second album, Organization, which was released in 1980. Very dark, very atmospheric. There is like a song like Enola Gay is a little bit brighter, but for the most part, you've got darker textures here, very moody, very cinematic, but always melodic, always very catchy music. Side 2 in particular on this album is really dark, but if you like OMD and you haven't checked this album out yet, make sure that you do. And speaking of Kraftwerk, The Man Machine. This was, I believe, released in 1978 or 1979. Kraftwerk, definitely synth pop pioneers. This has some of their most recognizable songs on it, like The Robots, Neon Lights, which actually OMD did a cover of on their Sugar Tax album. But it's very much heavily analog synthesizer drum machine. If you love Kraftwerk, this is probably their most accessible album. although you can't go wrong with any craft work, to be honest, but this one happens to be a particular favorite of mine. And the band had this whole aesthetic where they all wore matching suits, they all looked the same. Definitely one of the most influential synth pop bands. And if we're talking synth pop, we have to talk Depeche Mode. And I'm talking early synth pop. I guess I should have made that clear at the beginning of this episode. When I'm talking like early synth pop, I'm talking like late 70s up until, say, like 82 or 83. That's kind of the golden period for synth pop for me. But you have to talk about Depeche Mode's debut album. No, it is not a top 5 Depeche Mode album for me, but still, as far as early synth pop goes, you cannot go wrong. And you can definitely see the Kraftwerk OMD influence on a record like this. This was back when Vince Clarke was their lead songwriter. Martin Gore only contributed, I believe, 2 tracks on here. Definitely classic synth pop here with New Life, Puppets, Boys Say Go, Photographic, Tora Tora Tora, and of course, Just Can't Get Enough, which still is played on the radio today. Great early Depeche Mode before their sound kind of evolved and they got a little darker, a little more industrial, but definitely worth checking out. The next album is Telecon by Gary Numan. Gary Numan, now everybody knows him for that song Cars, and I think everybody had that impression of Gary Numan, and that's all he ever did. But Gary Numan has quite the deep discography, and if you love the analog synthesizer, if you like Kraftwerk, if you like dark, atmospheric music, if you like Thomas Dolby, you will love Gary Numan. Gary Numan is just a master of the synthesizer. He has so much great work that people have never discovered before. Telecon is a great album. This is a double disc album. I don't know if this is a repress, but I don't know if the original was a double album too. But some great stuff on here. Again, if you love synth pop, if you love just pure early 80s analog synthesizers, definitely check that one out.
No concentration means fail these days. I leave the table saying I am real. I feel the pressure like your eyes on me. Don't mention that they meant books on love. I can't be sure, I can't be sure. You ain't the real one, you ain't the real one.
next one I'm going to show is by the Simon and Garfunkel of synth pop. I'm talking, of course, about Soft Cell. And I know that's a terrible comparison. No, they weren't. But they were a duo. And this is one of their kinkier, drug and sex-filled albums. This has, of course, the song that anybody knows by Soft Cell, Tainted Love. It's got Sex Dwarf on here, Say Hello, Wave Goodbye, which David Gray did a brilliant cover of. But just some real, just like the cover and the title of the album indicate, nonstop erotic cabaret. This is like synth pop porn, actually, if there ever was such a thing. But gotta love this one. Soft Cell, they weren't around very long, but the stuff that they put out is just classic synth pop.
Down the high street, you've got the attraction, you've got the pulling power. Walk my little doggy, walk my little sex walk. We can make a scene, we'll be a team, making the headline sounds like a dream. When we hit the floor, you just watch them move aside. We will take them for a ride, alright. They all love your miniature ways. You know what they say about small boys.
The next band most of you should be familiar with, Talk Talk, and their second album, It's My Life. Could have gone with a first album, but I feel like there was such a progression. You got a little bit of that new romanticism on here. You hear a lot of Roxy music, Brian Ferry influence on an album like this. Their first one, The Party's Over, it's okay, but it's very primitive, even more so than Depeche Mode's first album, where they hadn't really kind of caught on yet. Yeah, there are a couple good songs on there, but they were a little too one note in terms of the synth pop on their debut album, but on this one, they definitely expanded their sound more. And with every subsequent album, Talk Talk would expand their sound. They'd take more risks. They'd get into more interesting sonic territory. But this was back when they were still basically strictly synth pop, but in a Brian Ferry, Roxy Music kind of way. Who knew I was going to show this album, The Golden Age of Wireless by Thomas Dolby, the North American edition. One of the greatest albums, not only of the synth pop genre, but of the 80s in general. This is a desert island disc for me. I love this album, and again, if you're only familiar with the video on MTV for She Blinded Me with Science, there is so much more to Thomas Dolby than that song. That song is almost a novelty song, although I love it to death, but the rest of the songs on this album are amazing too. Airwaves, Commercial Breakup, Europa and the Pirate Twins, Wind Power, Cloudburst on Shingle Street, all of these are just classics of the genre. This is a must own.
A hungry heart
And the last one I'm going to show, they started out as Joy Division, and they were kind of art rock, what we might call today a little bit of goth rock. But Joy Division were innovators of post-punk, new wave, and New Order after Ian Curtis died. They regrouped, got themselves a new keyboard player. This definitely has more synthesizers than anything that Joy Division ever used, even though on the album Closer, you could see they were kind of moving in this direction. This is not by any stretch New Order's best album, but it is very much early synth pop. Again, you can see the Kraftwerk influence, Gary Newman influence even. Great tracks here. Dreams Never End is fantastic. The clip I'm going to play is for Chosen Time, which is my favorite song off this album. A little bit of experimentation. This is not like strictly pop music. There are some pop elements here, but it's more interesting electronic music, I guess I would say. And New Order, of course, they own the 80s in terms of great club dance music, new wave dance music. But anyway, so those are 10 essential albums I feel you should have in your collection if you are a synth pop fan. Let me know what you think of this video, of these albums. What would be on your list? Hope you're doing great, and take care.